Are we live? It says no data. I don't know what that means. Okay, looks like we're live. I'll chat a little bit with you guys before we jump into the book in case the audio is weird or something and I need to make adjustments. Speaking of adjustments, my consciousness is fairly well adjusted at the moment. I tried to take a threshold dose of San Pedro earlier this morning, and it was the bottom of the bottle. So I'm still pretty altered, which should make things interesting, I think. I bet. Speaking of interesting, it's been a really interesting day in terms of just, I guess, discoveries and insights. You know, this camera angle's weird, isn't it? Let me tweak that a little bit. That better? Yeah. It's less weird to look at. Long story short, basically, make sure you subscribe to my Substack because there's this last entry that I'm working on. It's really deeply satisfying, I guess is a good way to put it. I'm really happy with the work we're doing there. And I was notified yesterday that I was number 30 in the top rising new Substack creators in the philosophy niche, which blew my mind. Because there's an awful lot of people. So that's looking good. And also, I'm offering access to up to the $10 tier in Patreon and Substack for 1 year. I can't remember how much, but it's less than if you were to get both. So you can email me if you're interested in that. And there's also the founders level membership, which is also discounted if you do Patreon and Substack. And the founders, it's what they call it, you know, founders level membership, Illuminatus tier, it comes with 4 1-hour consultations in addition to the rest of the perks. So that's all good and well. So first tonight, filters and magnetism, which I have no idea really what that's going to entail, but I have a feeling it's going to be one of those chapters where there's a lot of sort of how's that word? You know, when you're meandering, and less to the point, you know. But then we're getting into mastery of the sun, and for me, I think for anyone really, that's kind of the heart of all of this. The idea that we're all basically avatars of the fire and the light that emanates to us from Ra. In fact, one of my pivotal experiences involved kind of being summoned by the sun out to a field and guided through a ritual that yielded some crazy results. And the next day I discovered that it was all happening during the biggest solar storm in recorded human history. And like last year, before I found out about the solar maximum that's coming up, sorry, it's also really cold in here and I'm literally shivering. So that's a bit distracting. So, I mean, literally, can you see me shaking? Like, this is crazy. We have heaters on the way. Don't worry, guys. If you're coming for the event, we do have heaters on the way for every room. Right now, we just have one broken one and the one in my family's room, keeping them warm while they're sleeping. So I'm just shivering. And my thing I usually wear is wet. It was washed and it's hanging to dry. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So before I even knew this was happening again, I just randomly watched this Rupert Sheldrake video where he was talking about how the solar maximums are opportunities for us to sort of interface more directly with this solar consciousness. And I don't know exactly what that means. You know, I have trouble with the idea that it's literally the sun. I'm not saying I have trouble with the idea that the sun is conscious exactly. but I feel like it's more of a gateway to the universal mind. But one way to think about this that's kind of interesting is that what we think of as particles can also be described as sort of bunched up points in the, like if you took a blanket and a rubber band and, you know, they're like little bunched up electromagnetic bundles. And so they have the most fundamental level of intelligence. They do stuff for a reason, you know? And then as you scale up, you find animals and humans that have brains full of magnetite, which creates a point of density in the electromagnetic field, and you have this intelligence. So if this correlation holds, stars would be super fucking conscious. And, you know, Sirius, for example, which is associated with higher consciousness and has a weird presence in my life. And, you know, the Kofan, ayahuasca drinking tribe in Ecuador claims to communicate with Sirius when they drink ayahuasca. I've had that experience in a way where I was, I guess I downloaded astrophysics of the star system that I couldn't possibly have known, or it was published a couple days later after the ceremony. You know, lots of the Hopi, the Freemasons, the Dogon, you know, there's a lot of different traditions that have some sort of strange relationship with Sirius. And it turns out that Sirius is a point of extreme density. It's like 3 times the size of the sun, but I think like 10,000 times as bright and hot or something. It's like way more intense. Point being that would explain why it radiates its awareness to all of these antennas on Earth, you know. Anyways, kind of going off the deep end here, but not really. You know, this is what we're talking about tonight with filters and magnetism and the mastery of the sun. Man, yeah, definitely still plenty San Pedro. Let me check in with the chat real quick and then we'll jump into the book. All right, so it begins. Let me blow this up a little bit more. Filters and Magnetism, Chapter 18. Let us now adventure in Thessaly, the country of enchantments. Here was Apuleius, deluded like the companions of Ulysses, and underwent a shameful metamorphosis. He was turned into an ass. Here all is magical, the birds that fly, the insects humming in the grass, even the trees and flowers. Here in the moonlight are brewed those poisons which compel love. Here spells are devised by the Strigus to render them young and lovely like the Charities. O all ye youths, beware. The art of poisoning the reason, or filters, seems as a fact, if traditions may be trusted, to have developed its venomous efflorescence more abundantly in Thessaly than elsewhere. There also magnetism played its most important part for exciting or narcotic plants, bewitching and harmful animal substances, like that buffo over there. Not that it's harmful. Derived all their power from enchantments, that is to say, sacrifices accomplished and words pronounced by sorcerers when preparing filters in beverages, stimulating substances, and those in which phosphorus predominates are naturally aphrodisiacal. Anything which acts strongly on the nervous system may determine passional exaltation, and when a skillful and persevering will knows how to direct and influence these natural tendencies, it can make use of the passions of others to profit of its own, and will soon reduce the most independent personalities into instruments of its pleasures. From such influence, it behooves us to seek protection, and to give arms to the weak is our purpose in writing this chapter. These, in the first place, are the devices of the enemy. The man who seeks to compel love, we attribute such unlawful maneuvers to men only, assuming that women can never have need of them, because they already got it, you know. Must in the first place make himself observed by the person whom he desires, and must contrive to impress her imagination. He must inspire her with admiration, astonishment, terror, even with horror, failing all other resources. But at any cost, he must set himself apart in her eyes from the rank of ordinary men, and, with or against her will, must make himself a place in her memory, her apprehensions, her dreams. The type of Lovelace is certainly not the admitted ideal of the type of Clarissa, but she thinks of him incessantly to condemn him, to execrate him, to compassionate his victims, to desire his conversion and repentance. Next, she seeks his regeneration by devotion and forgiveness. Later on, secret vanity whispers to her how grand it would be to fix the affections of a Lovelace, to love him and yet to withstand him. Behold, then, Clarissa surprised into loving Lovelace. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, honestly. This is probably something that if we were, more contemporary, we would, it's probably like the equivalent of celebrity romance or something, and maybe not. It could be it's old Greek romance or something that I just don't, I'm not familiar. She chides herself, blushes, renounces 1,000 times, and loves him 1,000 more. Then, at the supreme moment, she forgets to resist him. Had angels been women, as represented by modern mysticism, Jehovah, indeed, would have acted as a wise and prudent father by placing Satan at the gate of heaven. Oh man, that took me a second. That's a good one. It is it is a serious imposition on the self-love of some amiable women to find that man fundamentally good and honorable who enamored them when they thought him a scapegrace. A scapegrace? Wow. That's like the opposite of a scapegoat, right? When they thought him a scapegrace. I'm almost speechless because, like, we all know what he's talking about there, but it's just such a wild way to put it. So, like, eloquent and poetic. I think he's talking about how women, like, they superimpose these characteristics on men and then they discover that they were a scapegrace at the end of the day. The angel leaves him disdainfully saying, "You are not the devil." Oh my God, he's killing me tonight, man. Play the devil as well as you can if you wish to allure an angel. No license is possible to a virtuous man. For what does he take us, say the women? Does he think us less strict than he is? But everything is forgiven in a rascal. What else could you expect? The part of a man with high principles and a rigid character can never be a power save with women whom no one wishes to fascinate. Jesus, dude. Oh my God, ain't shit changed but the names. The rest, without exception, adore the reprobates. It is quite the opposite with men, and this contrast has made modesty women's dower, the first and most natural of her coquetries. One of the distinguished physicians and most amiable men of learning in London told me last year that one of his clients, when leaving the house of a distinguished lady, observed to him, "I've just had a strange compliment from the Marchioness of Loudon, say. Looking me straight in the face, she said, 'Sir, you will not make me flinch before your terrible glance. You have the eyes of Satan.' 'Well,' answered the doctor, smiling, 'you, of course, put your arms round her neck and embraced her.' 'Not at all. I was overwhelmed by her sudden onslaught.' 'Beware how you call on her again, then, my friend. You'll have fallen deeply in her estimation.' The office of executioner is commonly said to go down from father to son, but do executioners really have children? Undoubtedly, as they never fail to get wives. Marat had a mistress who loved him tenderly. He, the loathsome leper, but still it was that terrible Marat who caused the world to tremble. Love, above all in a woman, may be termed a veritable hallucination. For want of a prudent motive, it will frequently select an absurd one. Oh my God, I'm dying. Oh my God. Deceived, deceived jocund for a baboon. What horror. Ah, but supposing it is a horror, why not perpetrate it? It must be pleasant to be occasionally guilty of a small abomination. Given this transcendental knowledge of the woman, another device can be adopted to attract her notice, not to concern oneself with her, or to do so in a way which is humiliating to her self-love, treating her as a child and deriding all notion of paying court to her. The parts are then reversed. She will move heaven and earth to tempt you. She will initiate you into secrets which women keep back. She will vest and unvest before you, making such observation as between women among old friends, I have no fear about you. You are not a man for me, etc. Then she will watch your expression. If she find it calm and indifferent, she will be indignant. She will approach you under some pretext, brush you with her tresses, permit her bodice to slip open. And I can tell you guys from experience, man, I never really understood, because I'm neuro divergent, I guess, on the spectrum. And I never really had the normal interest in pursuing women that most men do, not to the same degree. Like, I don't think I've ever hit on a girl ever in my life, honestly, unless like I was drunk, and that didn't happen very often. Certainly not publicly. But I always had like lots of really attractive girlfriends, and I didn't really even realize it was unusual. And I realized eventually that a big part of what was happening is that I did not pursue them. I didn't pay any attention to them. If they didn't come to me, I was not going to bother either, ever. And that in my experience, it's absolutely true. That lack of interest is like the best possible thing you can do if you're a single male. Everything he says there, and also, I've turned down a lot of women just because I could. I think, and they hate that. They hate when they know that a man is not susceptible to their wiles. It's like the most infuriating thing, especially if they're really attractive. Like, really attractive women just cannot believe that if men threw the kind of temper tantrums I've seen when, you're like, what? No, no, thanks. And they're like, what the fuck is wrong? Are you gay? Like that kind of thing. We'd be arrested. So it's an interesting dynamic. And it's one that most men never have the, presence of mind to take advantage of. Man, I'm really cold. This is crazy how cold it is. It could be the San Pedro too. I have vasoconstriction, so I'm like doubly cold. Anyways, women in such cases occasionally will risk a violence, not out of desire, but from curiosity, from impatience, and from provocation. A magician of any spirit will need no other filters than these. He will also use flattering words, magnetic breathings, slight but voluptuous contacts by a kind of hypocrisy, as if unconscious. Those who resort to potions are old, idiotic, ugly, and impotent. Where indeed is the use of the filter? It's awesome, man, because when we got into this chapter, I was kind of like, oh no, man, charms and filters type shit. Like, that's not what we're about here at all. And this is just perfect. Where indeed is the use of the filter? Anyone who is truly a man has always at his disposal the means of making himself loved, providing he does not seek to usurp a place which is occupied. It would be a sovereign blunder to attempt the conquest of a young and affectionate bride during the first felicities of the honeymoon, or of a fortified Clarissa already made miserable by a Lovelace, or bitterly lamenting her love. We shall not discuss here the impurities of black magic on the subject of filters. We have done with the concoctions of Canidia, the epides of Horace. Tell us after what manner this abominable Roman sorceress compounded her poisons. While for the sacrifices and enchantments of love, we may refer to the eclogues of Virgil and Theocritus, where the ceremonials for this species of magical work are minutely described. Nor shall we need to reproduce the recipes of the grimoires or of the little Albert, which anyone can consult for themselves. All these various practices connect with magnetism or poisonous magic and are either foolish or criminal, or both. Potions which enfeeble mind and disturb reason assure the empire already conquered by an evil will. And it was thus that the Empress Cossonia is said to have fixed the savage love of Caligula, mad emperor of Rome, whose purges consumed thousands on his blazing altars of syphilis. Or how about Julius? What is that one? How about Julius, medieval crusader of God's will who searched for the elixir of life led to the ritual satanic killings of hundreds of Parisian youths? Or Giles Laval? Prussic acid is the most terrible agent in these envenomings of thought. Envenomings. And hence we should all beware of extractions with an almond flavor and never tolerate in bedchambers the presence of laurel almond, datura stramonium, almond soaps or washes, and generally all perfumes in which this odor predominates, above all when its action on the brain is seconded by that of amber. By that of amber. To weaken the activity of intelligence is to strengthen proportionally the forces of unreasoning passion. Love of that kind, which the malefactors we are concerned with, would inspire is a veritable stupefaction and the most shameful of moral bondages. The more we innervate a slave, the more capable we make him of freedom. And here lies the true secret of the sorceress and Apuleius and the potions of Circe. The use of tobacco by smoking or otherwise is a dangerous auxiliary of stupefying filters and brain poisons. Nicotine, as we know, is not less deadly than prussic acid, and is present in tobacco in larger quantities than is this acid in almonds. The absorption of one will by another frequently changes a whole series of destinies, and not for ourselves only should we watch our relations, learning to distinguish pure from impure atmospheres, for the true filters and those most dangerous are invisible. These are the currents of vital radiating light, which, mingling and interchanging, produce attractions and sympathies, as magnetic experiments leave no room to doubt. The history of the church tells us that an arch heretic named Marcos infatuated all women by breathing on them, but his power was destroyed by a valiant Christian female who forestalled him in breathing and said to him, "May God judge thee." The Cure Goffridi, who was burnt as a sorcerer, pretended to enamor all women who came in contact with his breath. The notorious Father Gerard, a Jesuit, was accused by his penitent Cartier of completely destroying her self-control by breathing on her. The excuse was most necessary to minimize the horrible and ridiculous nature of her accusations against this priest, whose guilt, moreover, has never been well established, though consciously or unconsciously he had certainly inspired an exceedingly shameful passion in the miserable girl. What is that? Mademoiselle, probably, Ronfang. Having become a widow in 16 whatever, says Dom Calmet in his treatise on apparitions, was sought in marriage by a physician named Pourroy. Failing to obtain a hearing, he thereupon gave her potions to induce love, and these caused extraordinary derangements in the health of the lady, increasing to such a degree that she was believed to be possessed, and physicians, baffled by her case, recommended her for the exorcisms of the church. Thereupon, by command of M. de Porcelet, Bishop of Toul, the following were named as her exorcists: M. Viardin, doctor in theology, the state counselor of the Duke of Lorraine, a Jesuit, and a Capuchin monkey. Is that what he means? I have no idea. He means a Capuchin monkey. But in the long course of their ceremonies, almost all the clergy of Nancy, the aforesaid Lord Bishop, the Bishop of Tripoli, suffragan of Strasbourg, M. de Nancy, former ambassador of the most Christian king at Constantinople. Come on, man, is all these titles really necessary? 2 doctors, specially deputed deputized to exist, frequently exercised her in Hebrew, Greek, and in Latin, and she invariably replied to them pertinently, though she herself could scarcely even read Latin. Mention is made of the certificate given by Nicolas de Harlay, learned in the Hebrew tongue, who recognized that Mademoiselle Renfant was really possessed, that she had answered the mere motion of his lips without any uttered words, and had given numerous other proofs. The Sieur Garnier, doctor of the Sorbonne, having also commanded her several times in the Hebrew language, she replied lucidly, but in French, saying that the pact bound her to speak in ordinary language. The demon added, "Is it not sufficient for me to show that I understand what you say?" The same doctor, addressing him in Greek, inadvertently used one case for another, whereupon the possessed woman, or rather the devil, said, "You have blundered." The doctor replied in Greek, "Point out my error." The devil answered, "Be satisfied that I mentioned the mistake. I shall tell you no more." The doctor bade him be silent in Greek, and he retorted, "You bid me silent, and I will not be silent." This remarkable example of hysterical affection carried into the region of ecstasy and demonomania as the consequence of a potion administered by a man who believed that he was a sorcerer proves better than anything we could say the omnipotence of will and imagination reacting upon one another, and the strange lucidity of ecstatics or somnambulists who comprehend speech by reading it in thought, though they have no knowledge of the words. Interestingly, along these lines, people have gotten anesthesia and come back with like only speaking Chinese or with a French accent or whatever, or speaking a language that they didn't speak before they were put under. So it does seem that there can be some sort of kink in the brain that suddenly, I kind of think that these languages are something that exist as like algorithms in frequency, and that's how that happens maybe, but it is a thing that can occur. So for this person to have been put into some altered state through some weird filter and then understand Greek and whatnot could be a related phenomena if the story is true. Though they have no knowledge of the words, I make no question as to the sincerity of the witnesses cited by Don Calmet. I am merely astonished that men so serious passed by the difficulty with the pretended demon experienced over answering in a tongue foreign to the sufferer. Had their interlocutor been what they understood by a demon, he would have spoken as well as understood Greek. The one would have been as easy as the other to a spirit so learned and satirical. Don Calmet does not stop here with his history. He enumerates a long series of insidious questions and unserious injunctions on the part of the exercisers, and like a sequence of more or less congruous replies by the poor sufferer, he was always ecstatic and somnambulistic. So basically what he's saying is like, even though the possessed person understood Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, they weren't able to answer questions that the demon would have been able to answer, but only only things the woman would have understood, no matter what language they were speaking. And that's kind of what he's pointing out, that it's not actually evidence of any kind of possession, because it's actually evidence that it's not, and that somehow the brain is capable of doing this. It is needless to add that the excellent father draws precisely the luminous conclusions of the not less excellent M. de Merville. The phenomena being above the comprehension of the witnesses, they are all ascribed to perdition. Splendid and instructive conclusion. The most serious part of the business is that the physician Poirot was arraigned as a magician, confessed like all others under torture, and was burnt. Had he by any potion really attempted the reason of the woman in question, he would have deserved punishment as a poisoner. That is the most we can say. But the most terrific of all filters are the mystical exaltations of misdirected devotion. The most terrific of all filters are the mystical exaltations of misdirected devotion. Donald Trump, will ever any impurities equal the nightmares of Saint Anthony or the tortures of Saint Teresa and Saint Angela de Foligny? So the nightmares of Saint Anthony was the fires of Saint Anthony, actually. I think either way, it was ergot poisoning. And this kind of brings me back to another, or roundabout, I guess, to another aspect of the mysteries that is in dispute that I think that I have solved. And that's one of the things I'm working on in Substack, is to build my case for this. But basically, Hoffman, the discoverer of lysergic acid diethylamide tartrate 25, proposed that the kykeon of the Eleusinian Mysteries was an ergot brew. And there are a number of reasons why that doesn't work. One of them being that the same process that would render it not toxic enough, maybe, to consume would also destroy the LSA. Or it would be very weak. And that doesn't account for like life transforming visions and, and then another bit of evidence that was presented was a skeleton that was found in a temple that had similar themes like wheat and whatnot. And so they said, well, this is an Eleusinian temple in Spain 500 years later. And the skeleton had ergot sclerotia stuck in its teeth, but that's a fatal dose. Look, it's a skeleton. You know what I mean? Like, that's not for tripping. You're not going to have chunks of ergot stuck in your teeth. If you do, you're dead. That's not for tripping. So it's a really bad theory. And further experimentation with ergot, of course, after the first guy died from gangrene type symptoms and insanity, and, it's a terrible way to go. They wouldn't have continued experimenting. So recently, I proposed that it was actually acacia, and this is why Freemasons are still buried with acacia leaves, and it is why it's the tree of life and the tree of Osiris in Egypt, and it's also why the Greeks had reverence for acacia, and there was no evidence of it until a ceremonial vase was found a few weeks ago that contained Harmala alkaloids. And the thing is, the DMT would not be detectable, more than likely, after it's way more unstable. So my acacia root theory for the kykeon has at least a little bit more evidence in favor of it than Hoffman's theory, which pleases me. The last applied a red-hot iron to her rebellious flesh and found that the material fire was cooling to her hidden ardors. With what violence does nature cry out for that which is denied her, but is brooded over continually to increase detestation thereof. The pretended bewitchments of Magdalene Bobbin of whatever began with mysticism. The excessive fear of a given thing makes it almost invariably inevitable. More to the point, I don't want to get too deeply into it because it would take forever. But I have a video called like Mastering Fear. I think it's really old. I should probably do it over. I'm sure it's pretty cringy. But the story is absolutely valid and important. And it has to do with this series of sort of initiations where I was kind of called out into the desert every night, and I faced a different fear. And the moral of the story was that if you absolutely had no fear, that nothing could harm you. And it has to be absolute. And of course, there's always the caveat here that this applies to order and symmetry, but there's also chaos. So when we say nothing can harm you, it's within certain parameters, obviously, but it does work. On one occasion, I was startled by a rattlesnake. And I jumped like white men are not supposed to be able to jump like this. And I had my dog with me. And as soon as I calmed my energy, I'd like the feeling of the dissonance in my body as it settled. The rattlesnake tail completely came to a stop, perfectly synchronized with it. And my dog stopped barking at the snake. All of it happened simultaneously. Like, it's really difficult to describe, but it was a really strange feeling too, because that snake's rattle and the way that my energy, like, so perfectly, it was crazy, man. And then once I had it, you know, I had to remain like unflinching because my dog was going to get bit and I couldn't afford, you know, he did eventually get bit by a rattlesnake in California, and the anti-venom shots were like, he needed 3 of them. I think each one was like $2,200 or something. You know what I mean? I was not trying to have it. But yeah, the whole series of these lessons, the first one I had to face my fear of heights, you know, and vertigo. It's not really a fear of heights so much as it's just vertigo, you know. So I climbed a sheer cliff in the dark of midnight, you know, and then the rattlesnake thing was the next night. And then it culminated with this encounter with a cop. Anyways, watch the video if you're interested. But in my experience, what he's saying there absolutely tracks. To follow the 2 curves of a circle is to reach and to meet at the same points. Nicholas Remigius, criminal judge of Lorraine, who burnt alive 800 women as sorcerers, beheld magic everywhere. It was his fixed idea, his mania. He was eager to preach a crusade against sorcerers, with whom Europe, in his opinion, was swarming. In despair that his word was not taken, when he affirmed that nearly everyone in the world had been guilty of magic, he ended by declaring that he was himself a sorcerer and was burned on his own confession. Oh my gosh, round and round we go, where it ends usually depends on where it begins. To preserve ourselves against evil influences, the first condition is therefore to forbid excitement to the imagination. All those who are prone to excitement are more or less mad, and a maniac is ever governed by his mania. Place yourself then above puerile fears and vague desires. Believe in supreme wisdom and be assured that this wisdom, having given your understanding as the means of knowledge, cannot seek to lay snares for your intelligence or reason. Snap. Damn. Place yourself then above puerile fears and vague desires. Believe in supreme wisdom and be assured that this wisdom, having given you understanding as the means of knowledge, cannot seek to lay snares for your intelligence or reason. Everywhere about you, you behold effects proportioned to their causes. You find causes direct and modified in the domain of humanity by understanding. In a word, you find goodness stronger and more respected than evil. Why should you assume an immense unreason in the infinite, seeing that there is reason in the finite? Truth is hidden from no one. God is visible in his works, and he requires nothing contrary to his nature from any being, for he is himself the author of that nature. Faith is confidence. Have confidence not in men who malign reason, for they are fools or impostors, but in the eternal reason, which is the divine word, that true light, which is offered like the sun to the intuition of every human creature coming into this world. This is the secret to becoming fearless. I've been trying to tell a certain fool about this for a few days now. Maybe he hears me now. If you believe in absolute reason, and if you desire truth and justice before all things, you will have no occasion to fear anyone, and you will love those only who are deserving of love. Your natural light will repel instinctively that of the wicked, because it will be ruled by your will. Thus, even poisonous substances, which it is possible may be administered to you, will not affect your intelligence. That's crazy that he's saying that right there. I'll tell you why in a second. Ill indeed they may make you, but never criminal. So at the time, I was a medical marijuana provider, right? And I had this patient, I guess I can say his name because he's no longer with us, unfortunately, R.I.P. Ricky. He was actually the brother of the bandito from the story where I knew, I've told on the channel, I knew like the name of his dog, his brother's dog, and the girl that set him up to get shot, and the guy that shot him, his name, and all that stuff. And then he had the encounter with the gray alien a couple weeks later, where he said he threw a rock at it, and he said it was like it went into another dimension. That guy's brother, I had just quit doing pills, opiates mostly, and he didn't have money, but he didn't want to ask me for anything for free. So he showed up with like a big bag of Xanax or Valium, big giant bag of Valium. And he's like, can I trade you? And I was like, all right, man. But I didn't want them, you know, I wasn't using them, but so now I had this giant bag of Valium. And one night I was instructed, like, just to, you know, like prove something, I guess, to eat them all. And I did. I took them all. And nothing happened. Nothing happened. And I knew that would happen, but I kind of didn't believe it. And I was scared shitless. Like, this is really dumb. And I did call a friend and told him what I did. And he lived far away, and he drove all the way over there in the middle of the night. And he said he came to my house and checked to see it. And he said he was sleeping normally. And because he'd seen that bag, he knew how big it was. He's like, dude, you're going to die 10 times over. Nothing. I wasn't even hungover. Like, I woke up completely normal and refreshed in the morning, like nothing happened. And I had this Egyptian calendar that I don't know who gave it to me, even hanging on the wall. And I looked at it at the date the day before, and it said, on this day, Osiris will protect the organs of the initiate. And I was like, what the fuck? So I almost hate to even talk about that. Don't ever try anything like that. You know what I mean? I'm not advising that if you think you're in that place where you can do shit like that, that you should do it. My situation was my situation, you know. And it says, ill indeed they may make you, but it had no effect at all. None at all. I mean, they were the biggest milligram. And, it, you know, it was that thick. I was like, look, and, you know, that's the craziest thing I've ever done because a voice in my head told me to, I think. And nothing happened. What most contributes to render women hysterical is their soft and hypocritical education. If they took more exercise, if they were instructed more frankly and fully in matters of the world, they would be less capricious and consequently less accessible to evil tendencies. Weakness ever sympathizes with vice, because vice is a weakness which assumes the mask of strength. Madness holds reason in horror, and on all subjects it delights in the exaggerations of falsehoods. In the first place, therefore, cure your diseased intelligence. The cause of all bewitchments, the poison of all philters, the power of all sorcerers are there. As to narcotics, yeah, let's go back and just, madness holds reason in horror. In all subjects, it delights in the exaggeration of falsehood. In the first place, therefore, cure your diseased intelligence. The cause of all bewitchments, all possessions, the poison of all philters, the power of all sorcerers and black magicians is there. As to narcotics or other drugs which may be administered to you, it is a subject for the physician and the law, but we do not think that such enormities will be largely reproduced at this day. Well, you know, he's wrong there. Lovelaces no longer stupefy Clarissas otherwise by their gallantries, and potions like abductions by masked men and imprisonments in subterranean dungeons have even passed out of our romances. All these must be relegated to the confessional of the black penitents or the ruins of the castle of Adolfo. Sage advice, man. And it's crazy how it was kind of just meandering, you know. At one point he's like, you know, the Mademoiselle whatever and blah blah blah, doctor of Constantinople and blah, you know, just all this nonsense that just has nothing to do with anything. And then he just like, bam, you know what I mean, brought it all home like in the most insane, profound, poignant, fucking perfect way possible. And literally the reason for all that nonsense is so that the people that were watching that aren't like determined, you know, will just turn, they would click away, you know. That's literally the purpose of that kind of shit. Crowley did it too. I don't mind doing it, I guess, you know. He's done it a lot in this book, and you'll notice if you go back through it and look, it'll go to nonsense and babbling and just, and then all of a sudden that shit will just hit like that. So there's a method to the madness, and there's madness not to be found in the method. Except maybe taking, you know, 10,000 milligrams of Valium, just to see if something in a voice in your head is telling you is true. It will not harm you, it told me. And I was like, are you sure about that? Because I really wanted to know if it was right about stuff, you know. It was really during the testing period. And I was like, oh man, that's a hell of a gamble, but all right. Boop, and I couldn't believe it when I didn't even have, if you take, I've taken plenty of Valium and Xanax, you wake up the next day, like your brain is a little bit rattled, nothing. There was nothing, no trace of all of that Valium having passed through my system. Oh no, who is this person? I'm afraid I'm going to have to go ahead and hide you, buddy, because that's really obnoxious. Flooding the chat with this BS. Char Chin is a member of the Order of Friars Minor Capuchin, forming since 15. Thank you. I was going to ask someone to see what the hell that was all about. I forget when I was 17, someone had a big garbage bag of leaf, traces of weed in it, so we smoked it with poppy seeds. What? Hey, all right. So now we're getting into the sun stuff. I should probably block this guy so he can't. How did he get a top fan's crown? God damn it, where are my mods? I'm too high for this. Put user in timeout. 24 hours, confirm. All right, that guy will shut up now. Please do me a favor, you guys, if you appreciate this content. And after that bit, you guys know what part I'm talking about. If you don't appreciate this content, there's something wrong with you. Like that was perfect. The way he explained all that stuff about reason and what was it? Like, if you can see reason in the finite, why would you see unreason in the infinite? And, he said it better. That was that part of the book. That might have been the best part of the entire book so far. That chapter. So, chapter 19, the mastery of the sun. Oh yeah. By appreciating the content, I meant like button, subscribe, bell notification, Patreon, consultations. I promise I won't show up in this state. I didn't even mean to show up to this in this state, man. It's just the bottom of the bottle and the chunks, and it's literally like drinking vomit. It's so terrible, so bad. I hate drinking San Pedro. But it's really helpful. So, in the long run, we now come to that number, which is attributed in the tarot to the sign of the sun. The denary of Pythagoras and the triad multiplied by itself represents wisdom in its application to the absolute. It is with the absolute, therefore, that we are concerned here. To discover the absolute in the infinite, the indefinite, and the finite, such is the great work of the sages. The all is in the all. And this is something I was working on today with my Substack post about how the repetitions of history actually start at the level of like the photon. Because Fibonacci and golden mean numbers actually do show up at the quantum level. Something I always suspected but didn't check into and confirm until today. So then I found a video that actually, like, I talk a lot about how I had this vision of the wave, basically the oscillations of the wave are what imposed order on the fucking chaotic primordial stew of energy and compelled it to, arms in order by means of symmetry. I don't that might have come out gloppy, but unlike this primordial stew, once the waves hit it, right? And the video demonstrated exactly how that happens and why it is that these underlying fractal recursive patterns govern or are expressed in, and maybe all systems from time to consciousness to human development to historical periodicity, right? So that's what's going on there with the discover the absolute in the infinite, the indefinite, and the finite, such as the great work of the sages, that which is termed by Hermes the work of the sun. To find the immovable foundations of true religious faith, of philosophical truth, and of metallic transmutation, this is the whole secret of Hermes. This is the philosophical stone. Now, this stone is both one and manifold. It is decomposed by analysis and recomposed by synthesis. I will explain. The fact is that all matter is light in a standing wave, and both Roger Penrose and the Kabbalah tell us that once all particles meet their anti-corollary, they will nothing but photons will be left. So the Philosopher's Stone is both one and manifold. A ray of light is many photons. It is decomposed by analysis, and it is recomposed by synthesis. In the analysis, it is a powder, the alchemical powder of projection. Before the analysis and in the synthesis, it is a stone. One manifestation of this, actually, the planet Mercury was just discovered to be in the process of alchemical transmutation into photons, the salts of Mercury. Literally, this is actually something that like astrophysicists just published papers saying. I mean, come on, you guys, like how ridiculous is this? The literal planet Mercury is undergoing exactly the alchemical transmutation process. The light of the sun, the magnetism of the sun is transmuting the salt of Mercury into photons. You can't make this shit up, man. The all is in the all. The philosophical stones, say the masters, must not be exposed to the air nor to the eyes of the profane. It must be kept in concealment and preserved carefully in the most secret receptacle of the laboratory. The key of the place always carried upon the person. He who possesses the great arcanum is truly king and is above any king, for he is inaccessible to all fears and to all vain hopes. In any malady of soul or body, a single fragment broken from the precious stone, a single grain of the divine powder are more than sufficient for their cure. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear, as the master said. Salt, sulfur, and mercury are the only accessible elements and passive instruments of this great enterprise. Everything depends, as we have said, upon the interior Magnus of Paracelsus. The work consists entirely in projection, and projection is accomplished perfectly by the effective and realizable intelligence of a single word. There is but one important operation, and that is sublimation, which is nothing else, according to Geber, but the elevation of the dry substance by means of fire, with adherence to its proper vessel. He who is desirous of understanding the great word and of possessing the great arcanum, after studying the principles of our doctrine, should read the Hermetic philosophers carefully, and he will doubtlessly attain initiation, as others have attained it. But for the key of their allegories, he must take the one dogma of Hermes contained in the Emerald Table. And to classify the knowledge and direct the operation, he must follow the order indicated in the Kabbalistic alphabet of the Tarot, of which an absolute and complete explanation will be given in the last chapter of this work. Among the rare and priceless treatises which contain the mysteries of the great arcanum, the chemical pathway or manual of Paracelsus must be placed in the first rank, as comprising all the mysteries of demonstrative physics and the most secret Kabbalah. So that's the next book that we will be putting through this process of streaming and commentating, comprising all the mysteries of demonstrative physics and the most secret Kabbalah. This unique manuscript is preserved in the Vatican Library. A copy was transcribed by Sendivogius and was used by Baron Schaudy when composing the Hermetic Catechism contained in his work entitled The Blazing Star. This catechism, which we point out to instructed Kabbalists as a substitute for the incomparable treatise of Paracelsus expounds all the essential principles of the great work in a form so clear and complete that a person must be absolutely wanting in the quality of occult understanding if he fail in attaining the absolute truth by its study. We shall now give a succinct analysis of this work, together with a few words by way of commentary. Raymond Lilly, one of the grand and sublime masters of science, says that before we can make gold, we must have gold. Out of nothing, we can only make nothing. Wealth is not absolutely created, it is increased and multiplied. Hence, let aspirants to knowledge understand thoroughly that neither miracles nor juggler's feats are required of the adept. Hermetic science, like all real sciences, is mathematically demonstrable. Even its material results are as exact as a well-worked equation. Hermetic gold is not only a true doctrine, a shadowless light, truth unalloyed with falsehood, it is also material, actual, pure gold, the most precious which can be found in the veins of the earth. But the living gold, living sulfur, or true fire of the philosopher must be sought in the house of Mercury. This fire feeds on air. To express its attractive and expansive power, a better comparison is possible than that of lightning, which primarily is a dry and terrestrial exaltation united to humid vapor, and afterwards, in virtue of its exaltation, assuming an igneous nature, acts on its inherent humidity, which it attracts and transmutes into its own nature, after which it falls rapidly to earth, where it is drawn by a fixed nature similar to its own. He's talking about the electromagnetism in the brain, fed by oxygen, comparing it to lightning. These words, enigmatic in form but clear in essence, express openly what the philosophers understand by their mercury, fructified by sulfur, becoming the master and regenerator of salt. It is, which you could call even action. It is azot, the universal magnesia, magnetism, the great magical agent, the astral light, the light of life, fertilized by animic force, by intellectual energy, which they compare to sulfur on account of its affinities with divine fire. As to salt, it is absolute matter. All that is material contains salt, and all salt can be converted into pure gold by the combined action of sulfur and mercury, which at times act with such swiftness that transmutation can take place in an instant or in an hour, without labor for the operator and almost without expense. At other times, when the tendencies of the atmospheric media are more contrary, the operation requires several days, months, occasionally even years. As we have already said, there are two primary natural laws, two essential laws, which balanced one against another produce the universal equilibrium of things. These are fixity and motion, analogous to truth and discovery and philosophy, and an absolute conception to necessity and liberty, which are the very essence of God. Necessity and liberty. This is the balance of like the automata of the subconscious and the influence of the will. And the thing is, you know, you might say, isn't everything supposed to be 50-50 and we're like 90% subconscious? Yeah, but those conscious moments are of such magnitude and potential to affect the course of the behavior of the subconscious that they are equal in power. That's the balance. And so I made a decision today, and I can't say anything, but just watch, just watch and wait. Regarding the subject here, the Hermetic philosophers give the name of fixed to all which is ponderable, to all which tends by its nature to central rest and immobility. Whatsoever obeys more naturally and readily the law of motion, they term volatile, and they compose their stone by analysis, which that is the volatilization of the fixed. Then by synthesis, that is the fixation of the volatile, which they operate by applying to the fixed, called their salt, sulfurated mercury or light of life. Sulfurated mercury or light of life. Mercury is literally being turned into photons right now. The planet Mercury. Directed and rendered omnipotent by a secret operation, they possess themselves in this manner of all nature, and their stone is found wherever there is salt, which is equivalent to saying there is no substance is foreign to the great work, and that even the most apparently contemptible and vile matters can be changed into gold, which is true in this sense, as we have said that all contain the fundamental salt. represented in our emblems by the cubic stone itself, as may be seen in the symbolic and universal frontispiece to the keys of Basil Valentine. To know how to extract from all matter the pure salt which is concealed in it is to possess the secret of the stone. It is therefore a saline stone which the ode or universal astral light decomposes or recomposes. It is one and many, for like ordinary salt, it can be dissolved and incorporated into other substances. Obtained by analysis, it may be termed the universal sublimate. Recovered by the synthetic way, it is the veritable panacea of the ancients, for it cures all diseases, whether of soul or body, and is termed in an eminent manner the medicine of all nature. If you want a clue as to what he's getting at there, just look at the work of Michael Levin. When by means of absolute initiation we can dispose of the forces of the universal agent, this stone is always to our hand, for its extraction is then a simple and easy operation, far different from projection or metallic realization. The stone in its sublimated state must not be exposed to the air, which might dissolve it and spoil its virtue. Moreover, to inhale its exhalations is not devoid of danger. The wise man more readily conserves it in its natural envelopes, knowing that he can extract it by a single effort of his will, and a single application of the universal agent to the envelopes which the Kabbalists term shells. To express hieroglyphically this law of prudence, the sages of Egypt described to their Mercury, personified as Hermanubis, a dog's head, and to their sulfur, represented by the Baphomet of the temple, a prince of the Sabbath, that goat's head which brought such odium upon the occult associations of the Middle Ages. There is more to this association of the dog's head, though, and it has to do with Sirius. For the mineral work, the first matter is exclusively mineral, but it is not a metal. It is a metallized salt. This matter is called vegetable because it resembles a fruit, an animal because it produces a kind of milk and blood. Chapter 20, Thaumaturgy. Man, this just gets better and better, doesn't it? Let me close this joint, grab my steak. I'm about to savagely rip into it right on camera, too. So if you're a vegan, turn your pretty little head. It's about to get ugly. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty sturdy lately, which is nice because I've been going through it with like health issues and whatnot. In case you're wondering about that, it's still not really clear what's going on, but I definitely do have some sort of vasculatory disease that could possibly kill me eventually, you know. But it's probably genetic. That's what, yeah, I don't have an official diagnosis yet, but the doctor didn't speak English, and his Spanish was too far south and rapid, and I didn't. The surgeon said if I sent him the stuff, he would tell me anyway. So I wasn't even really listening that closely, but it sounded like he said that it's a genetic thing. Yeah, I mean, it's not the best thing, but I have been able to improve things pretty dramatically just with San Pedro and Shilajit and Uña de Gato and various other plants. Also, I chew coca constantly. I'm realizing now because it adds oxygen to the blood somehow. And I thought I was just doing it for the elevation, but it's actually probably been extremely important for not, accruing damage from lack of oxygen in my feet in places where this vascular issue has. But I know what to do now. And it has to do with Sangre de Drago. I need a lot of that. Probably going to have to dieta with it. What am I doing here? I'm trying to make this prettier again. Which means media source goes up here. There we go. Boom. That's nice. Maybe I just won't even be on screen so I can eat my steak without feeling like a savage. Nah, fuck that. Let's go, vegans. Let's go. Let's go, vegans. That's all right. I'm going to have to be vegan too for a minute, I think, because there are certain requirements for a certain operation that I've committed to now. All of a sudden, some things just kind of dawned to me, and I realized what I must do, and I'm not telling you. Although it wouldn't be that hard to divine with a little bit of thought. It's pretty late too, and I want to make sure that I get to play my guitar a little bit tonight because these altered states really lend themselves to insight in that domain. But I'm gonna go get my steak, and if you guys have any questions or comments or anything that you would like me to interact with, you can throw it in the chat. Otherwise, hit the like button, share, subscribe. Please turn your bell notifications on so you don't miss anything. Consider becoming a patron because we're demonetized and you get access to a ton of stuff. And I'm starting a new series for patrons because my partner pointed out the other day that, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, that a lot of the things that I say require a ton of context. And I can't do that every time, you know, every stream I can't like go through, like, you know, qualify everything. And, you know what I mean? I can't, it's just too much. So she suggested I put together like a primer that sort of like, here's the backstory that you need to know to understand all of this stuff. And that made a lot of sense. So I'm going to start putting that together. And it's at first going to be patron only content. And then at like maybe the $5 tier or something. And then eventually it's going to be just all part of a thing that you will access for some price, you know, like a course, basically. So that is in the works, and I'm hungry, so I'll be back in a second. Okay, so where's my chat? I gotta find it. Geez, guys, that was a really good one. I'm quite pleased with Mr. Levi. Thank you, Natural State. Bought this from a long time friend and supporter who happens to be here living in the same town. It's really the best steak that we can get in the area. Last night we had a tomahawk. It was gangster. Oh yeah, Machu Picchu. I think some are, but hold on, let me back up a little bit. Let's see what's going on. Would you read my occult book if I gave it to you? I might. If I start reading it and it's terrible, then I will not finish reading it. But if but if you would like to send it to me, I'll definitely start reading it. I went through and reported. Thank you. It was dumb. Well, he said I prefer mushrooms. Probably talking about my San Pedro consumption today. But they're for different purposes, kind of. You know, I mean, there's some overlap, but they're different purposes. Do you think hieroglyphs are ancient sigils? Not exactly, but all things are basically sigils. I'll expand on that in a moment. I'm just trying to figure out why I'm getting this box that, okay, it's gone. Yeah, okay. So, questions and comments, guys. The only thing I see so far is our hieroglyphics sigils. And what all occult symbols are is an attempt to compress information into a smaller space for potency, you know? So, hieroglyphics to me are more like the product of like universal allegories, and they can contain a lot of information because the universe is fractal and holographic, and when we create allegories and myths, they emerge from the subconscious, which is a pattern recognition marvel. So in the case of ancient Egypt, for example, one of the reasons I think the myths are so enduring and powerful is that the Egyptian empire existed. I mean, not one empire, but the civilization consisted continuously or existed, goddamn, continuously for 3,000 years or so, 3,070 years. So their observations were over a grand scale, so their record of patterns, you know what I mean, that they were drawing from was massive. And so they produced these myths that expressed the summations, of the sum total of the information from these patterns in a concise manner. And that's why, for example, the story of Osiris and Horus, which I was writing about today, where Osiris goes blind or loses his eye, and then Horus gets it, but he's able to fly from a higher vantage point. Like this whole process of the destruction of an empire, or the boomer consciousness being replaced by, you know what I mean? And there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to expand it all here because it would ruin my Substack entry. But you see what I mean? That's why these myths are so applicable and relevant, is due to this sigil-like nature of the allegories. There's all this information crammed into them. Compressed is a nicer word than crammed, I suppose. All right, so for those of you that just tuned in, we're done with the book, and we are in the AMA segment. If anyone's interested in bouncing anything off me, this is your opportunity. I will give it a few minutes because I have a lot of lag. So I won't see your questions for like 2 whole minutes or something, which gives me an opportunity to eat some more of my steak. Like a savage, just chewing red meat off this. Look how raw it is. Mooing at me. And if you just tuned in and you missed at least the second half of this, it's like the last couple of paragraphs of the previous chapter, and then the entire chapter of the Mastery of the Sun was off the chains. Okay, so have we given me any questions or anything? Nope. Okay, guys. Well, I guess that is a wrap. I will see you. Wait, where's one? What is this? How do I feel about Levi? What do you mean? Like, how do I feel about him personally? I don't know what you mean. You have to be more precise with that question. Like, I did go bowling with him last week, but that's left hardly an impression. He was quite drunk, I guess, All right, let me see if I have a clarification on that one. Okay, well, I'll just talk generally about it, I guess. I mean, Aleister Crowley claimed to be the reincarnation of Levi, and I really don't know anything about his like personal behavior or what his reputation was or anything, but I do know that all of these the best occult works that I've encountered that came after him steal from him constantly. You know what I mean? Crowley did it all the time. Levi, Pike constantly in Morals and Dogma. There's all kinds of things that are lifted pretty much directly out of this book in particular, Transcendental Magic, like the opinion being the queen of the world, you know? And that is a great one too, because opinion really is one of the malignant, narcissist, archetypal like rulers, like the toxic aspect of the feminine in full force, and it's an illusion. You know, the reality is that the belief in opinion is supported and encouraged, fomented, I guess, even by the overlords, because it keeps people from seeing the truth. As long as every, you know, guy believes that every other guy has just an opinion and nobody really knows what the answer is, they can keep people guessing and lost and stupid, you know. The reality is that there's no argument about what is the best political system at this point. There's no argument about what is the best economic system. There's no argument even in regards to absolute esoteric and metaphysical spiritual truths. You know, there are limits to our knowledge, but there's really none of this is a matter of opinion. That is all just delusion that is inculcated into the cultural narrative in order to keep people confused, right? And so my point being that the distillation of wisdom that I have found scattered throughout this book is the best of its type that I have seen anywhere. And it's not really possible to elucidate any of this stuff in any more like, you know, clear, concise, comprehensible terms, and in a lot of cases even not with any greater level of literary pyrotechnics, you know. That may be the only excuse for Crowley to exist after Levi, because I think he maybe did that a little better. You know, he put the flames on it a little harder, a little less nerdy and more of an aesthetic or something, more panache. You know what I mean? But Levi seems to be the great pillar of modern Hermetic wisdom. And I hate to even call it Hermetic because it's not really owned by Hermeticism or anything. It's just that like that happens to be the only remnants, you know, or the only oscillations of that undistilled truth that seem to have reached us through the quantum decoherence of the waves of empire. You know what I mean? Like that kind of influence that it bears that name, you know, but it's just what is really. They're not wrong about anything. You know, when you look at the assertions and stuff about light and electromagnetism and just, you know, you will not find any error, because that's what happens when you have achieved a certain level of proficiency in adepthood. You understand what reason is and how to apply it, and you know when reason is limited. But beyond that, you're never wrong. It's something that people have a hard time believing is possible, but if you pay close attention to certain people, you'll see it. And one of the tricks that this type of magician learns is one of the secrets to never being wrong is to never say anything that you're not certain of. Once you have the, you know, formula for truth, if you apply the right kind and degree of force to the proper object through the proper medium. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. And there it is. It's really not even that hard. You know, what is difficult is keeping people from seeing it, the simplicity of it and the imminence of it all. That takes a tremendous amount of energy. And I'm still in some ways at a loss to understand like why they do it. I mean, my life would be a lot more comfortable if I was wealthy. But if I was wealthy, I can't imagine like bombing a bunch of kids because I want to be more wealthy. It doesn't. In fact, I would rather struggle than do anything immoral. Otherwise, I would be doing a lot better. You know, if you're smart and you have no morals, there's nothing stopping you from material success. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. And hence we have the fucking situation that we find ourselves immersed in. Show you my palms? I guess so. I don't know how clearly they're gonna. There's one of them. And here's la otra. Aquí es. Oh, how would I compare people to Gardini? You mean Wicca? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be disrespectful, but I'm tempted to be. Just in case there are any Wiccans watching, but he was a P3DO, and all he did was go find Aleister Crowley, and he interviewed him for 2 weeks towards the end of his life, and he took everything that he told him, and he made up a bullshit story about a coven of witches, and basically realized that Crowley was a little bit too, you know, he had to take the horns off of it to make it more accessible and so that hippies would buy it, like turn it into kind of a nature religion. And do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will became do as thou wilt and harm you none. Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And people say, well, he changed it to make it nicer. It was already love is the law, love under will after that, guys, you know? So he was just a plagiarist. I mean, there's like comparing Garden, whatever his name was. I know his name, but I just can't pronounce it right now. That guy, the Wicca guy, to Levi is like comparing like a diamond to a dung heap. You know what I mean? Like there's no relationship even. That guy was just a opportunistic predator. You know, he had no intellect or value, or, you know, he was just a fucking monster that stole shit from masters, you know. You could maybe say the same thing about Crowley. I'm not really entirely sure. I haven't made up my mind 100%. The thing is that there's absolutely no doubt that Crowley possessed genius on a level that I don't know I've ever seen outside of him. It may not have been consistent, but, you know, there were like these efflusions or something. My vocabulary scrambled due to mescaline content in my blood, but you know what I mean? Like it would erupt out of him, this genius, and that's legit. You know, I mean, I don't know what else to say about the rumors and whatnot none of them are substantiated. None of the worst things they say about him, there's any evidence that they're true. So there's that, you know, but in the case of Harold Gardner, I think his name was, there's plenty of proof that he was not okay. Yeah. And it's not hard to see the plagiarizing. It's just do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, love under will. Do as thou wilt, harm you none. Come on. So Wicca is Crowley for dummies. You know, it's just like, it's kind of a dumbed down, hippified version to make it more marketable and easier for the masses to process. So I don't appreciate it much, obviously, I don't think that's the goal here. We want people to step up, not for the mysteries to step down. That's not going to help. Look at what happened to Freemasonry when they dropped the 3-year probationary period and, a lot of the other real strict rules. Some of the things I've heard about people in certain lodges recently is pretty alarming, actually. So I hate to be a dick, but if I'm going to tell the truth, that's what I think. Thoughts on elemental magic? I'm not really necessarily an expert in the subject in the way that the popular culture describes it. So I don't know if I'm going to mean the same thing that you mean when I answer this, but really sylphs and the rest of the things that are associated with the elements correspond to aspects of our being. And so, mastery of the salamanders has to do with mastery of your sexual and creative impulses, and once you have brought those things once you have sublimated them, then you can begin to instruct them, and conduct them. But it's like, it's an interesting thing because your relationship to the forces of nature can never exactly be one of control entirely. It's really a matter of perspective. And so, in terms of the rituals, for summoning these gnomes and whatnot, sylphs, any act of ritual for the purposes of exaltation really means that you are attempting to see these things from a higher perspective, from a bird's eye view, and how they relate to all the components around them, So, for example, transmutation internally, right, as a spiritual alchemical process, you can't get rid of your anger issue. Exactly. You can't get rid of your shadow. You can't, you cannot destroy any fundamental energy. You can convert it to other types along a spectrum, the same spectrum, right? So like lust, you could transform into just like a healthy procreative impulse, or a better example, because I couldn't really think of like what you transmute lust into other than like, maybe a friendlier form of it, or, but a better example is greed, right? You can turn greedy ambition into philanthropic drive, you know what I mean? That type of conversion. But what is that really? You're just changing your perspective and the way that you interpret the same exact energy fundamentally, So that's what I think of elemental magic. And one of the other benefits of sort of these allegorical, representations of human emotions and whatnot, which is really what elemental magic is about. There are deeper levels that can be accessed via the symbolism, so you'll see people talk about things like water of ice or not water of ice, sorry, water of air or earth of air or whatever. And then you're like, well, what the fuck is that? And then you think about, well, water frozen is earth. If you apply flames to water, it goes in the air. If you concentrate it sufficiently at enough speed, it will cut through metal. like fire. And so in your process of engineering your metaprogramming, your metaprogramming practice, those kind of symbolic architectures can give you further insights into how to relate to the intersections of different aspects of your being. And in a way, I would say it's not really like sylphs don't exist in the way that like Allah doesn't exist. But I don't really view these things as like independent entities that exist outside of the human mind either. I think eventually what you come to realize is that in a sense, there's no difference between in our mind and outside of our mind. But generally, in terms of consequence on the physical world, there, you know what I mean? Like, there's no difference between inside and outside of your mind in the same way that it's, I don't know, it's difficult to explain. These things aren't real in the same way that the IRS is real, but they're not really unreal either, if that makes sense. It's kind of like the clipo, the shells of the dead kind of concept in the Kabbalistic tradition, or as Levi has tried to explain many times as we've been going through this book, that when you interact with a spirit, it's not the person. If it's like a lost loved one or something, it's not the person, but because all information is retained at the quantum level, there exists a record that is composed of every moment of the person's life, every thought they ever had, everything, every deed they ever did, and so when you're able to successfully connect with that, it's just a husk though, it's not like your uncle has the awareness and it's him. It's this sort of shell, and I think that what we think of as spirits basically all are that in some kind of configuration, The M on my palm? I've never thought about it. Let me look. Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. And there's a triangle on the other one. It looks just like the eye of Ra. Holy shit, man. It looks just like the eye of Ra. How have I never noticed I have the eye of Ra drawn in lines on my hand? Thank you for directing my attention to that, because I never think about really stuff like palms. All right. Do you guys have any other stuff you would like to throw at me? I'll give you a few minutes, nibble on my steak. My partner is really quite wonderful. I'd been tripping all day, and like I've been working on this blog just so intensely, like almost the entire time. And I hadn't really eaten anything. And I just got out of the shower and I was like, holy shit, I'm hungry. And I look on the table and there's, as if I had just imagined it into existence, there's like a giant 1.5 foot long ribeye steak just sitting on a plate. Like an apparition. Okay, I don't see anything. So, there. Every time I say that, ever done microplastics and heavy metal cleanse with alpha lipoic acid and distilled water? You know what's crazy about that question? Somebody asked me today how to get microplastics out of your brain. And all I could really offer is that there are things that are counteract what they're doing to your brain, which is inflammation, and other, but mostly that's the thing that's going to disrupt everything anyway. So, colloidal gold. Other than that, I couldn't really think of anything, so I looked it up. And they're actually looking at the same microorganisms that they're using to eat plastic in the ocean, to give to people to eat the microplastics out of their brains, which I thought was quite clever. Someone's using the actual neurons in their head instead of the plastic for once. Speaking of the Substack entry I was writing earlier, that was one of the things I was talking about how our coping mechanism to deal with what the world is becoming has partly manifested in the form of like very surface level interactions. And, we only deal with our coworkers and our children and, the world to the extent that we have to navigate our lives and then go to bed, most people. And that's a very plastic kind of ethos. And these people's brains are literally turning into plastic. That is not a coincidence. But yeah, somebody just randomly asked me that in a comment earlier. Methylene blue. Yeah, I've heard of methylene blue. I've never taken it. It doesn't really sound that smart, honestly, to me in a lot of ways. It can definitely cause problems. I know some of the benefits are confirmed. I don't know. It's just, if you take too much of it, it sounds like you can have some serious problems. So I don't know about that. But colloidal gold is proven for sure. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory. And neural inflammation is harder to treat. And colloidal gold is deposited right in the brain because that's where the light is needed. By the way, this theory that I presented a long time ago that gold and light, I mean, it's not like this isn't something that has been in ancient traditions forever. So that's not what I mean by my theory. I obviously didn't think of that, but gold and light are basically the same thing. And it occurred to me a while back when I was thinking about how there had to be some sort of conversion layer. If there's a universal mind, ideal becomes actual thing. And the ideal becomes real. And so I figured there had to be some sort of resonance that could be described via harmonic resonance imaging. And but the problem was that photons won't hold still to scan them like gold will. And then they made a solid out of light recently. And the people that did this, apparently, because the Langlands project found this resonance that I was imagining, the first thing they did was check gold and this, slow light, they called it, for this resonance. And it turns out they are the same thing at a level more fundamental than particles. And so what that means for us is that if we assume that the rest of the theory of the Hermetic tradition, regarding light and consciousness is correct, and that consciousness basically is light, that's what light is somehow. Gold having that relationship with light and then sitting in our brains. And anyways, there's already a lot of gold in our brains naturally. And God, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm almost sorry that I started talking about it. But light and gold interact in ways that nothing else does because they're the same fucking thing. And only, that's why they have this singular relationship, because they're not different really in essence. And the brain's ability to process so much information in a nanosecond, it has long been theorized that it has something to do with superconductors in the brain, but they thought that quantum effects were not possible in the brain because it's too noisy and warm. And then quantum effects were observed. And so they said, well, okay, so that can happen. And then we realized that light can make superconductors like gold superconductive below their critical temperature or above it. Right? So below it's more important in this case. And then we realized that there were not just biophotons. Biophotons are coming out of everything, but entangled biphoton pairs were observed emerging from neurons and also from microtubules. So there's light processes happening in the brain that would activate the superconductors, and this, leaps and bounds of understanding and consciousness. Anyways, I will also be writing about that in Substack and streaming about it when I am more coherent than I am at the moment through my own fault, I admit. Yeah, I'm not saying that methylene blue is never good. I mean, I'm not really inclined to use it. Yeah, spinach and kale may not actually be healthy. It's true. All right, guys. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm just getting delirious, and I want to play guitar before I'm not tripping anymore. So I'm going to do that. And I am going to really try to actually make the music stream on Saturday. I keep rescheduling it because of various issues, and I'm really going to try to make it happen this time. I've been putting a lot of "We are children of light, illuminated by the day spring of the Spirit of the Lord of on high." Last passage in the last Gospel of Matthew. Yeah, well, whatever the Lord on high is, to me, seems to be an oscillating wave, and light seems to be the central secret. Beyond that, I don't really have much to say in regards to God. Thank you guys, and good night.